And the Apex Squad is telling Parliament that even though they are masters of their own rules and procedures, those rules and procedures are subject to the 1992 Constitutional Republic of Ghana. This was in respect to the ruling to the effect that deputy speakers can vote while presiding over the business of the House. Then it was done. It's with our news planning desk. He joins me in studio to better appreciate the mind and the reasoning behind the 7-member panel's ruling, unanimous ruling on this particular issue. Dennis, always good to have you. Can you help us appreciate what was the reasoning and justification behind that unanimous ruling in that matter of whether or not deputy speakers while presiding over the business of the House can vote?
Well, so let's begin from the top, knowing that the questions that the Supreme Court set out to answer were: 1, whether or not upon the true and proper interpretation of Articles 102 and 1041 of the Constitution, a Deputy Speaker of Parliament or any other member of Parliament presiding over Parliament in the absence of the Speaker cannot be counted as part of the members before a decision is made. Now, in this particular question, the Supreme Court takes the view that the decision to say that the non-inclusion of the phrase "apart from the person presiding" in Article 104 must have been deliberate, and that to hold otherwise would amount to impugning the framers of the Constitution of that particular intent. You know that in Article 102, there's an express provision that the Speaker or the person presiding should not be part of the quorum.
Absolutely.
But when it comes to Article 104, that is different. It talks about the majority of voting. In the reasoning of the Supreme Court, they say that it is on purpose that clear distinction is made, that Parliament has two key functions. One is deliberative and one is legislative.
Right.
The deliberative is where they just go and have discussions. And at that point, there's an express provision that the person presiding cannot be counted as part of quorum. But when it comes to 104, then there is the express provision that, I mean, in that case, the express provision is not made. So the Supreme Court is unable to say that for the fact that the Deputy Speaker is sitting there, he cannot be counted as part of the quorum.
The quorum.
Yes.
And that next bit about the voting rights, they were quite clear on their ruling on that, isn't it?
Yes. So the other issue to that the Supreme Court set out to answer was whether or not upon the true and proper interpretation of the same articles, a deputy speaker or any other member presiding over in the absence of the speaker can take part in voting. Now, this was quite a complex matter when it comes to the voting matter.
Absolutely.
The Supreme Court was of the view that once the deputy speaker assumes that role, he still maintains his status as a member of Parliament. They make the case that the reason that the speaker is not allowed to vote is not because he's presiding over the meeting of the House. It's because he is not a member of Parliament.
I see.
So to say that the Deputy Speaker or a Member of Parliament who is a Member of Parliament, represent constituents, is not allowed to vote would not be the intention of the framers of the Constitution. Now they go on to make a complex analysis to say that even how we elect our speakers, for instance, the Speaker is one who does not belong to a party.
That's right.
If, for instance, the Speaker is elected from Parliament, the seat has to be vacated. So the other two Deputy Speakers will come from
both sides of the House
or different sides. Now, the Supreme Court says that if you deny a deputy speaker who presides over sitting because of that, because of the person presiding, what you are simply doing is that you are shortchanging the other side of one member, and that, in their mind, should not allow. They say Parliament works on the principle of one member, one vote. So if they take out the vote from the deputy speaker presiding, it means that they are denying the constituents of representation and making a decision in Parliament.
So it's all about the numbers game.
It's all about the numbers game.
It comes in here.
This particular instance.
It comes to
and
play.
Of course, to deny the constituents representation. The very last bit had to do with whether or not the passage of the budget,
the November 30 decision
was
to
valid.
approve the 2022 budget.
I mean, flowing from the reasoning that the deputy speaker can form part of the quorum for purposes of decision making, and flowing from the fact that the deputy speaker can vote, then it presupposes that what happened on that day was not out of order, for which reason they held that it was valid. Now, let me also be quick to add that in holding that it was valid, they also made mention of the fact that if there is a certain procedure in Parliament that takes away either the original or the casting vote of any member by virtue of the person presiding, then that is in clear contravention of the Constitution, for which reason it stands expunged from the Constitution.
You know, prior to this, the details of this particular ruling, there was that contention of whether or not the speaker, the first or second deputy speaker presiding over the House, tends to relegate that position of a member of parliament.
Yeah.
And while in the seat presiding over the business of the House as the Speaker of Parliament,
Yeah.
can still hold himself as a member of Parliament.
Yeah.
So the details of this ruling clarifies that position.
Yes.
That indeed, although the first deputy speaker is MP for Bekwai, second deputy speaker is also member of Parliament, they still have the voting right and performing their duties as MPs.
Yes, when it comes to voting.
Voting
Yes, when it
specifically.
comes for them to take a decision, they have to represent their constituents.
And they will be part of quorum.
Yes, and they say it is this, it's exactly the reason that when you read Article 104, there's no express exclusion of. So when you look at the difference between Article 102 and 104, you'd find that in Article 102, there's an express provision that excludes the person presiding or the speaker. But when you look at Article 104, that express exclusion is not there. So the Supreme Court relied heavily on that particular article to make that particular judgment.
Fantastic point and clarification that you put there. Just for the benefit of our viewers, that's what you see on the screen there. And the details, Dennis, that you put in very clear, precise, and summarized context for us all to understand exactly what's happening. What are some of the other issues that the Supreme Court ruled on? Because it's a pretty long ruling, as a matter of fact.
So before they even got into the substantive matter of making decisions on these three key issues, they spent quite some time. I mean, the most part of the judgment would be dedicated to things they call preliminary observations or matters. In that, they try to assess their jurisdiction and how they are going to go about it without it being seen to be an interference with Parliament. They make the case that Parliament, yes, they agree, is a master of its own procedure, but that there is another master that the procedure of Parliament is subject to, which is the 1992 Constitution. And that according to them, per Article 130, they have the right to interpret and enforce the Constitution. They make the case that there was a disagreement on the interpretation of their own rules in Parliament between the first Deputy Speaker and then the Speaker of Parliament. And that if it had ended there, the Supreme Court wouldn't intervene. But then they think that it has risen beyond Parliament and has been anchored on things that need interpretation. That's the reason they are bringing in Article 102 and 104 for interpretation and enforcement. So clearly, those were some of the things that the Supreme Court were looking at in their preliminary matters.
So they answer that question of interference quite clear in there.
Yeah.
Dennis, as always, appreciate the fantastic understanding of what the law really says in there. So that's Dennis Wadam. He is with our News Planning and Research Department.